meeting, which I will call to order at 5:35. The first item on the agenda is the agenda. So could I have a motion on that? Go ahead. Is Councillor Paul moves the agenda?
All right, so moved. Are there any changes?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'll move the agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Gamache. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm also trying to promote others as they come on. The next item on our agenda is the minutes from our April 8th meeting. Can I have a motion on the minutes?
I wasn't here last time, so I can't make that motion. Sorry.
I move to approve the minutes as listed.
Moved by Commissioner Harp, seconded by Commissioner Seguino. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Abstaining.
I'd abstain.
And we've got 3 abstentions, Commissioner Gamache, Karen, and Jane. And then the next item on our agenda is the public forum. So anybody's allowed to speak at this time. If there's, if you want to, we also allow public forum after kind of each item of our agenda. And so we've got public forum now. Talitha is about to give a presentation, so I'm happy to, there will also be a public forum after the presentation. So if you want to give comments specifically on Talitha's presentation, which I believe will include a quick overview maybe of where we are in the process, and then the survey, which is on board docs that they plan on starting to administer next week. And so with that said, yes, anyone can speak at this time. And if folks want to raise their hand. Also, since we have new members, I just want to quickly say we run this committee fairly informally, so we tend to use first names. So if that isn't okay with anyone, feel free to just note that and ask to have your last name used. And Luke, I will unmute you, and anybody else who wants to talk, if you can raise your hand. I don't see Luke anymore, actually. Okay, anybody else who wants to speak in the public forum? Then Talitha, we will hand it off to you.
Good evening there. Good afternoon here. This is Kara Snin with Talitha Consults. Good to see you. I like waving hands. I wave my hands a lot. Hey, so we had a great town hall for a second time in a row. The first one was on March 30th, and the second one was just on April 27th, Tuesday. And it's so encouraging to have multiple joint committee members showing up and supporting that effort. And, you know, you all, almost all of you kept quiet to encourage people to speak, but I know that you were actively listening. So for that, we are very grateful. I also want to say thank you for REIB for hosting it, inviting multiple interpreters. Yes, deserving of an applaud there. We had interpreter from Mai languages, Mai, Kirundi, Swahili, Somali, and then the person who spoke Lingala can also speak French. And so they were just there to like support with language access wherever necessary. And that was very intentional in that our EIB, in partnership with other departments, want to make sure that the onus is on us, not on the people to come and tell us we need an interpreter, but that we intentionally made an investment, we meaning the city under the leadership of Skylar, offer interpretation so that people, if they show up, they don't have to feel like they have to ask. And with that, we also launched a quick polling of who showed up. And I'm just going to save time if you didn't show up to this town hall. There is a recording already, so please go and take a look at it for the first 10 minutes. It will show you who showed up. I think 90% was residents, and the top three were 30 to 40-year residents to 20 to 30, and like 5 to 10. Those are the top three type of residents who showed up, and mostly are folks who spoke one language at home, primarily English. With that, I want to have Karima to say something, what happened after the town hall, because it's not just one and done. We left the public with an email for them to email us. So Karima, can you just give a quick overview of what we've been hearing and seeing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all again for all the support and for enabling us to have a really successful town hall. We've been receiving emails from community members, and some of them have requested that we keep some of their comments confidential, but others have asked that the comments also be put on the record. So Zariah and would it be Shireen that I would share those with? I can forward those comments, but they're comments that have been really, I think they've been telling as far as what some of the community concerns are. And so we'd like to make sure we share those. We're going to continue to leave that email open if anyone else wants to share. So we're looking forward to hearing more from the community, but they have been very, very open about their thoughts and their ideas and their visions for a healthier and safer city. So we're really pleased about that.
Right, and just quick feedback on that. I think there's on board docs, there's also executive content. I don't know if that would be an appropriate way to share some of the feedback.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
So if you can send it to Chanel, she should be able to put, there's public content for each agenda item, and then there's executive content that only the joint committee can view. So that's kind of the way that we handle sensitive material.
Okay.
So when we forward the document, we should say, Chanel, this is for executive content.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
With that, again, our charge is to design and implement multiple mechanisms in which people can engage and participate, right, with public input, specifically to public safety. So the next process in this initiative, equitable and inclusive participation, is public survey. We have partnered with a firm up and down. They are headquartered in Berkeley, but they're all over the West Coast. It's called MIG Consulting Services. And this is one of the 3 projects in which Talitha and MIG collaborate together. And we have one of their senior planners today, who is also a community engagement, traditional form, AKA paper form, and then a digital form online engagement specialist with us, Ryan Matau. And this is the format in which we're going to do, okay? So Ryan is based in Oregon. Besides all the professional credential, Ryan is a pretty cool father. As you may see in his little profile picture, I was just learning more about Ryan as well. So this is the format. We're going to show you what the public survey is going to look online, okay? It's very geographic-based survey. So when you are looking at the mock-up, I do not want you to get into content analysis, okay? Just slap yourself if you try to evaluate the content. I just want you to look at the optics, and I want you to think about user interface. Okay, what if I interface this way? So the first thing is a mock-up, and then you just comment on the user interface. With that, Councillor Hightower, can you give permission for Ryan to share his screen? You're muted.
Yes, give me 1 second. And Chanel, sorry, I just got an email from a constituent saying that called Daniel Feld, who said they were removed accidentally from the meeting, and if there's some way to override that. I don't know that there is, and I don't know how that would have happened, but I don't know if you can maybe work on that while we're doing that.
Yes, I can see what I can do. That was my mistake.
Okay. And then, sorry, you want me to make who able to screen share? Ryan?
Ryan, yes.
And so that's the first portion, just the optics, user interface. After looking at it, which we're not going to dwell on for a long time, okay, folks? After that, we will look at the paper survey where we will give plenty of time for you to give us feedback. However, this is not one and done. We also want you to sleep over it. And if you have more thoughts, you can email me or Karima, okay? So with that, I will hand it over to Ryan. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm
Still waiting. Yeah, Chanel, I don't think I have the ability to give Ryan the ability to share. So sorry to put another thing on you, but is that something you could enable?
Yes. Should I make him co-host?
I think that'll work. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. There we go. That looks good. Thank you. Appreciate the time to talk with you a little bit today. We've done, as Kara said, a quick mock-up using some content from early drafts of this survey, but not intended to be complete. What we're looking at here is just a landing for a demo of this platform, and really the opportunity to introduce people, obviously, with the product or the project. Starting off with some information about who is responding. This is a conscious choice around making sure, because who is responding is very important to us. We want to make sure that those demographic questions get put right up front. And one of the options in this, and one of the features that this platform particularly allows us to do, is to give some geographic aspects to the response. Really letting people kind of self-locate. And so this is a way that we can get beyond asking simple and sometimes not very descriptive questions like, what is your zip code? I understand there aren't just a whole lot of zip codes to draw from, and it doesn't give us a great differentiation. One of the ways that this platform can give us a better sense of where people are responding from is the basic interaction, which many of you will be familiar with from other web tools, is to be able to drop a pin directly on the map. The great part about that is that then we can harness those locations to filter out or to sort through results, whether it be by ward, whether it be by geographic area, whether it be by one side or another of a geographic barrier. We would then have a series of additional demographic questions that we have not completely fleshed out, but they would appear similarly to this self-identifying racial and ethnic identity here. We like to create those in, obviously, as open a format as possible to allow people to identify the way that they prefer to. And just to show kind of flexibility and alternatives, they can also use an existing map. The ward map was provided by the city to, with this intention, I think, to understand how are results spreading across the wards. This could be used in the same way with that home pin, but we can use the geographic kind of underlying GIS map the same way. So there's options both ways in that way. An important part of the questions as they're forming right now is really to understand kind of the degree to which people agree or feel safe or feel in agreement with a response to a question. There's a few different ways that we can also ask that. And in my experience, people are fairly familiar, obviously, with the fill in the bubble, you get one choice kind of option. When we have a series of these questions, we have found actually that a slider presentation like this works very easily. It is also very friendly. One of the things that we focus on with this platform particularly, and in all things online these days, is that we need to be thinking that people are primarily accessing the internet from a mobile device and they are not using a giant screen. So using the space we have very wisely. It's one of the reasons why what you're seeing here is constrained horizontally across the screen, is so that we aren't creating a survey that works really well on a great big screen and doesn't shrink down well. We're really starting from that mobile first perspective. If you're going to have a string of questions, using this vertical space requires a lot of scrolling, whereas a slider can present that same information in a very finger-friendly and variable format. We can also incorporate that geographic referencing into other questions. And we wanted to raise that as a possibility because that is one of the unique things that asking questions online allows us to do. We can ask those questions geographically in general and get the answer for me as a resident. We already know where they live, but if there are answers that have a specific where implied or intentionally and added to them, we can continue to use that pin functionality with the ability to ask really any follow-up question afterwards that would be tied to that location. So if we're asking about challenges, if we're asking about improvements that people could see on the ground in that community, we can ask for more detail, whether that be in an open-ended form or in a multiple choice or slider or any other presentation of question kind of after these pins are placed. One of the great things about that is the open-endedness of it, much like being able to write in whatever you want to. These pins can be, place as many of them as you like to really indicate your experience on the ground as you move through that expertise. So, as we said, this is not the complete survey. I wanted to just give a quick overview, really highlighting the alternative kind of presentations of material and introducing the possibility of that geographic coding of responses in a very user-friendly way so that we can then discuss content, which I'll hand over to Karima a little bit right now to really get into what specifically we need to ask, and we can be thinking about whether those do have that where component or not. There's no reason we have to go that route, although I would recommend it for the where do you live portion for the reasons we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I'm going to keep some space open here for questions on that interface particularly. And it looks like, Randall, if you have, I don't mean to take over for you there on the facilitation piece either, but I'm happy to field your questions.
Yeah, thanks. So this is just a quick question about the UI. So with sliders as opposed to bubbles or checkboxes, right? The default is going to be, there's going to be something which is marked as the default. So if a respondent doesn't want to indicate an answer, it will already be set as, for example, 3 in the middle, if it's a Likert scale, whatever it is, right? Do you have a way with a slider interface of indicating clearly between somebody who's intentionally marking a response as, for example, 3 versus somebody who's just not trying to respond to that question at all?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The system actually does not record an answer until that is clicked. So it is not a 5 in this case. This is a 0 to 10 scale. It is not a 5 until it is clicked and moved to that, or just clicked as a 5. So without an affirmative movement, there's no answer recorded. So those blanks then are a non-answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason that question is particularly important is that we don't want to water down our responses overall with a whole bunch of middling responses because people flipped through and didn't answer that particular question. So thank you for that.
The only thing I would add is, and if we're just talking about look, is I know that when I start surveys and I don't know how long they're going to take, it's always nice to have that little more. So.
That's a very good point. We have a couple of ways that we can indicate that, both kind of passively and more actively in the text. And as we get to how long the survey actually is, I think we can definitely get both a time or a number of questions kind of indication right up front. I think that's a really good note. Thank you. Just one last point before we leave this entirely, I just wanted to bring up a little bit about the geographic side of this and results, just to show you one of the reasons why we ask the question, where do you live as a point, is that it gives us an opportunity. This is a response set from Garden Grove in California, looking at where people have responded from during the process, after the process, really being able to understand that we did in fact hear from the entire community. The one other result-based outcome that is really powerful is when you have a question that is tied to a location, you can use the kind of geoprocessing tools essentially to see where there are concentrations, where there are places that we should spend specific attention on looking at those points piling up in the overall data set. And so the platform itself makes this very easy, and we can also export these results out for other analysis. So just wanted to offer that up because this is a platform we use a lot. There's a few tricks that it does quite well. And with that, I think maybe, Karima, do you want to pick up just on content from there? And we can always come back to this if necessary, but I'm going to kill my screen share here so that we can all see each other a little bit better.
And one more point that maybe straddles between what we just did and content, which is, I think in a previous version of this, I saw that some of the more, forgetting the name for it, but like who you are questions were at the end, which I think is generally better, just because if you start a survey and the first 12 questions are about who are you, I think more people are likely to click out of it. So
it's a judgment call regardless, and I think that we can certainly discuss that. I have my own opinions about that, but I would defer that certainly to Karis and Karima as we're all discussing that kind of through the content piece here.
And would love to hear. I'm not an expert on this, so would love to hear your opinions. But
I have a quick question. In terms of like people taking the survey more than once, is that one going to be kind of allowed? And then also, if it's not, do we have anything in place to kind of keep that from happening in terms of like tracking the IPC or whatever?
This platform does not track IP, and that's a conscious decision. It's actually a European-based, the European developed program, which is governed under the GDPR, which is the very stringent privacy policies for the European Union. So it's not tracking IP addresses. It does have some persistence built into it. For the technically minded, it is a cookie-based persistence. So if you are on the same browser, you will see your results. It will just be, it will be additive essentially to your previous response. Generally speaking, as an input tool, we use these platforms in a way that we don't want to be overly concerned with people coming back and adding to their response or coming back and responding again. It's really more of a, it's not about verifying that we have, 300 individual responses as much as we have these various points of input. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, I do have a question. Can we do a word limit? We don't want a novel in the survey.
Oh, yes. Sorry. So yes, all the open-ended questions can be limited to whatever character limit you would like as you go through. So yes, that is definitely an option.
So with that, may I please have permission to share my screen?
You should be able to now.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully everyone with the Joint Committee has had a chance to look over this is the, of course, paper version of the survey. And just to give you a little background on it, so some of the questions have come from some of our sources that we've relied on as part of this work, which is the Department of Justice. We've also developed some of the questions from Governing Alliance on Racial Equity. We've talked to our Talitha Public Safety and Law Enforcement experts. We've worked with REIB, and in addition to that, a lot of the content was gleaned from the conversations we've had with community members through the stakeholder workshop, the MPA meetings, and also the town halls. So that being said, I want to just open it up for any recommendations or feedback that you all have, and we can start. I don't think the respondent portion is as relevant, and Karis, feel free to jump in. But I do think that what we really want to hear from, unless there's anything glaring with the respondent info, is the specific questions related to public safety and health.
So the survey is split into 3 buckets, right? Three themes: respondent info, public safety needs and vision, and then the third one is specific to Burlington Police Department. Is that correct?
And also the vision, the community vision for a safer and healthier Burlington.
Thank you, Prima.
So I'm just going to move back up to the first one, which is public safety needs and visions. If the committee wants to take a moment to start providing feedback and comments.
And sorry, just to, before we do commissioner feedback and comments for the public, this is on board docs. And if anybody from the public has feedback and comments, I will kind of leave it open for now, so you can raise your hand if you do have, this is theoretically public forum, but you can also jump in later if you are still kind of looking at it as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to Randall and then Shireen.
Thank you. So I will go through the comments that I had marked for myself sequentially. So I'll start with question 9, which is on page 3. Question 9 reads, "Are you the first generation?" I think that question is ambiguous, so I'd recommend clarifying that. I will go on to, in public safety, question 3. That's on page 4. What are your greatest concerns in your community when it comes to public safety? So first, I assume that it will allow for multiple responses for that question. It doesn't indicate that clearly already, but it's not clear to me that all of those responses are going to be clear to the respondents. So, for example, exactly what is meant by disturbing the peace. There's another option for noise and public intoxication. So you want, I think, to clarify what disturbing the peace means in this context. Likewise, it's not clear whether public health services, as it's stated, will be clear to the respondent. So I'm recommending clarifying that. Violent crime enforcement can be ambiguous between enforcement of violent crime and a violent way of enforcing crime. So I'd recommend that be clarified as well. The next comment is on same section, number 6 on page 5. 6 and 7. So 6 is, who else would you trust to assist you in an emergency? The fact that emergency is left vague there means that I think it's not a particularly useful question yet. There are a wide range of emergencies, and one might trust each of these entities in an emergency depending on the nature or scope of the emergency. So I think without having some more clarification on that, it's a bit of an unclear question. Likewise, for question 7, who else do you feel plays an important role in keeping your community safe? It seems to me as though, and it doesn't clarify whether or not one or more answers are permitted for that question, but it seems like the answer very well could be all of the above to varying degrees. So it's not clear kind of what you'd be looking for, or how a respondent would be asked to respond to that. Question 9 in the Burlington Police Department section. This is on page 6. In the past 2 years prior to COVID-19, have you had a personal interaction with BPD? So I'm not sure first why prior to COVID-19 is included in that question. And then second, for called non-emergency, it's not clear to me whether that's referring to called a non-emergency number to reach, for example, the police department, like the police department's direct number, since the previous question is called 911 to report a crime. So it's not clear how those two questions, called 911 to report a crime and called non-emergency, how those are supposed to relate to one another. It seems like that's ambiguous, at least to me. Those are all the comments that I have. Happy to clarify any of those if you need it.
Thank you.
Shireen and then Karen.
Yeah, so I want to thank Randall because he covered the vast majority. So really, I think from the outset for me, my comment is it starts off with what is your ward? And I think one of the fundamental questions for the target audience is this expanding to business owners, workers who come into Burlington, NGO staff, because we may want to say, where do you work or live or something like that? And everything else I would have said was covered by Randall. So that's my comment.
Karen and then Stephanie.
Okay, thanks, Soraya. So my appreciation also to Randall, who covered about three of the issues that I had thought of, particularly the one about, are you a first generation? I think we need to definitely clarify what exactly that means. I assume that you're meaning, are you a first generation person living in Burlington? But if we're sending this out to business owners, I'm not sure, or people who come to Burlington, then perhaps we need another approach. The question that I had, I think it's question number 8, where it says, it's a question about how long you've lived here. So again, if it's only targeted to people that are living in Burlington, they're probably, if it isn't, then there should be something that says, I don't live in Burlington, but come here for work, or some other category. And then the other is that I would say that that 10 to 20 years, and that we should do 20 or more. I do think it's important for those people who have lived here a very long time, particularly who are older, that would be an important point. And then the other question I had was number 7, where it says, how many languages are spoken at your home? The answers are not how many. The answers are more related to what languages more than how many, because English is one. And I would question whether or not that should perhaps be reworded. It seems a little bit awkward. And then the other questions that Randall had noted about BPD, and I didn't write down the numbers, but they're on the page that's Burlington Police. It was something about pre-COVID, and the questions were right there. The questions were in the past 2 years, and then it says prior to COVID. So it would just seem as though maybe it's better to say in the past, during 2018 and 19, prior to COVID-19. I think if we're going to say past 2 years, then it's really not the past 2 years, and we probably should just be a little more specific. That was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Stephanie and then Jabu.
Thanks. My questions are whittled down now as well, but I want to refer to question 10. Have you had a personal interaction with BPD? And actually the one prior to that, I'm not sure the reasoning for limiting the assessment to the past 2 years. I think the past 5 years, quite frankly, is better and more will capture more people's experiences. And that relates to number 10, which is that some people have had more than one interaction with the police. And I think you may want to give people the opportunity to, and indicate to them that they can talk about more than one, and maybe also the year in which that interaction occurred. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, Jabu, and then we'll hop over to Perry.
Randall pretty much hit most of the things, but I just wanted to touch back on to page 3, question 9, the new American thing. That one kind of hits me personally, just because I'm first generation on my mom's side, and I believe 9th or 10th generation on my dad's side. So, I always check off the first generation box, but I'd like that expanded a bit more. And I went for page 6, question 9, but that just was Stephanie already talked about that one. Sorry.
May I ask a follow-up question to Commissioner Gamash's clarifying question?
Absolutely.
That's a lot of work. So when you indicated just what Commissioner Sanguino said, what do you mean? I want to make sure we.
Mainly the whole in the past 2 years prior to COVID, I thought 2 years was a bit limiting. I thought it should be expanded. I mean, the number is arbitrary, but I think 2 is just a little short, too short.
So five would be a better number.
I think it's a better number. Yes.
Okay. And did you also want to whatchamacallit? What about the point that Commissioner Sanguino make about more than one interaction? Is that also what you're speaking to, or just the number of years?
I'll speak to just the number of the years personally.
Thank you.
Great. Perry, you are permitted to speak, and then I'll put myself in the stack.
Thanks. I'm going to keep my comments a little bit briefer, and I can, always follow up offline as well. I think the interest around making this catering to a mobile platform is a little bit of a concern for me. I would be curious to hear more about the sort of in terms of making sure that the sample size and the respondents are being sort of just proportionately engaged, if that makes sense, from across various demographics. I do know that for example, smartphone ownership is just relatively higher among college educated folks versus folks who might not have a high school degree or have lower access, lesser access to higher levels of education. And I think that when I think about folks who are primarily marginalized by police violence, it's not college educated whites. And so I do just want to think about when we're capturing this data, if we're talking about folks that are houseless, folks who are in mental health crisis, lower income folks, I want to think about who has necessarily accesses, and I'm sure that we will have this survey will be available in multiple modes, and I'm not necessarily sure smartphone versus they have folks have access to a widescreen computer, but it just was something that when you said this is mobile accessible, I was who probably has mobile phones, and it's the majority of people are college educated white folks. I'm pretty sure that's just I haven't done a deep dive on the statistics, but a cursory dive, that seems to be the case. So that was something that I just thought was interesting, and especially because I think we don't want to just capture data from folks who are not going to be marginalized by police violence, that we want to explicitly make sure we're capturing information and response from folks who do experience police violence statistically and have experienced it in the city. So that was something that I just thought of really quickly. I think on page, hold on, let me look at what page this is on. I'm sorry, I'm speaking really fast. Page 4. At the top of page 4, public safety employees work to keep the Burlington community safe by addressing and preventing crime, searching for lost and missing persons, and responding to disasters and emergencies. I read public safety employees as police officers. I'm not sure if that's what was intended. I don't think we should start out a survey question by saying police officers keep the Burlington community safe by doing X, Y, and Z, because there are many people who do not have experiences with police officers that are of safety. And they don't actually experience safety with police officers. So I'm not sure who, what was intended by saying public safety employees. I think that's kind of broad, but I certainly read that partially as police officers, and I'm not sure if that was the intention, but I don't think, I think it's a bit leading and problematic in terms of getting, I don't know the technical data term, but whatever, untampered or something data. I don't know. Other people who do statistics and data probably know way more than I do. I do want to also just quickly flag on page 6, Commissioner Harp also brought up the question number 8 on page 6. In the past 2 years, how often do you see BPD officers working together with community members to solve problems? Again, I think this also has, to me, concerning sort of leading phrasing or not great phrasing, because I've seen BPD officers work a bunch of times with folks in the community, and my perception of them is that they're not solving problems. And so I would probably say never. That is just personally how I would respond to this as a respondent. And then it asked me to skip a bunch of questions. And I don't know if that's really what we want. And I'd have to talk further with someone about like how this survey is being conducted and what kind of responses we're looking for. But like, I don't think I should be skipping the next few questions, because I would be, as a respondent, I would answer that little or never, because of my perception of how, when I see police officers in the city working with folks in the public, I have felt that they have not created more safety. But I've witnessed them interacting with folks a bunch. So I think there were plenty of other comments around that, like Commissioner Savino's concerns about just limiting it to 2 years. I think that's a great point. And I think Commissioner Harp's point on that question was also fantastic as well as the rest of the feedback being brought up by commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarification on number 8, so where it says skip to the next question, it's really going to another question where it's a deeper dive for the respondent to be able to provide details on if they said little or never. It's not skipping any questions. So we'll make sure that we fix that.
Great. I see Stephanie and Ryan have their hand up. Before we go into second round, I'll just quickly give my comments. And I'm sorry if I was also trying to monitor hands, so I don't know if I'm repeating what some other folks said. But like I said, I would move the personal information to the end, especially if there's any way of like keeping response if somebody doesn't finish the survey all the way. I think it's much more valuable to get people's answers than to find out who they are. Then questions 2 and 4, and I think there's another one, but I think it might actually be the one you just were talking about, Karima. We're only asking for detail for people who feel unsafe. I mean, I don't know if that's just to limit the amount of things that are to analyze, in which case I will back off, but I think it's also good to hear why people do feel safe if that's not too much additional work. Question 3, I didn't know if there was a chance that we could have that be an open question with a word limit that somehow also automatically gets analyzed. Question 5 just seemed odd to me. I'm not sure what you're asking, and I forget what that is. Oh,
yeah. I'm sorry. I was writing.
Yeah, question 5 is, if you call 911, how likely are you to be satisfied by the response? It may just be that the wording is weird, but I didn't understand completely what that question was. Question 6 and 7 just seemed too similar. I feel like only having one is worth it. Question 8, I thought it was strange that there was only a positive question, so we're only asking like the plus and not the minus. That seems a little biased to me. Then I would flip the sections of safer and healthier Burlington with BPD. I would ask the overarching kind of vision question, follow the vision with the last section, and then put BPD at the end. Question 13, if that could be a ranking question instead of a choose all that apply, I think that could be interesting, but I'll defer to the survey people. I think it's just, I could check. I feel it's just, we're going to get a lot of people who will answer all of them, which may not provide us with kind of what we want. And yeah, top of 4, same comment that Perry made. I'm not sure why that is even there. I think that if we wanted to do something around defining public safety, since that's what the survey is about, I think that could be helpful, but I didn't understand that either. And I saw that we've got Nell raising their hand, so I'll permit them to speak, then go to you, Ryan, and then give Stephanie a second round. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I'm going to try and remember. I've been trying to keep things in my head, and I might forget, but I'll just write them in the chat if I forget. So the first thing I'll say right off the bat, there's probably a plan around this, but I just hope that there's going to be a plan to make printed versions of these available so that the onus won't be on folks to like access a printer and etc. Like if there could just be stacks available in easy to access places, that would be great. A couple other things. So question 6 and 7, the ones that are in the public safety section. I think it's really important that first responders, that those are separate options. I think that like there's like the etc. I'm like, I don't even know what the etc. is. I don't know if that includes police, but like my response about police versus firefighters would be very different. Same with the social worker, mental health or crisis responder. I am a little bit fuzzy on what crisis responder would be. And I think maybe you could clump like social worker, mental health professional, but I think just being more clear about who those people are, because I think that there are nuances, and also just thinking about like the amazing efforts that are being done to bring in like different people other than people who historically respond to like quote unquote emergencies. Oh gosh, let's hope I can. Oh, and then 14. And I think maybe I heard someone talk about this, so apologies also if this is redundant, but I'm just not sure where these 5 things came from. Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering, so I guess I'm just wondering like if there's a reason that it's these 5 things, if the city is just like particularly interested in whether people know about this, but it just, I guess I'm just curious about it. And like if it's necessary and what the reasoning is behind that, but like I just want to broach the conversation and then folks can take it from there. And then the very last thing, I think, there's a couple times that the word crime is used. Crime feels like a tough word because it feels pretty it feels subjective a little bit. And I think that Commissioner Harp articulated well, like the crime enforcement thing, like which side of that. But I also just think that crime in general feels like a pretty subjective thing that's defined by one person at least who's involved in it, but might not be seen in the same way as everyone. So thanks. This is cool. I'm glad to be able to just ask directly in here. I appreciate this. Done.
Great. Thanks, Nell. And then going to Ryan and then back to Stephanie.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond really quickly to a couple of points and just kind of throw in a few pieces of insight, just because I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. The first one is Pew Research does a lot of tracking on cell phone and smartphone use across income groups and across geographies. We can look a little bit closer into what is available to kind of get more geographically specific, but across the country, 2 things that have been noted really strongly. One is that we do have relatively strong smartphone adoption across the board, income-wise, even if there is still a gap. I appreciate the constant, let's stay aware of where those gaps are, where those blind spots are. The reason that we emphasize mobile friendliness is that because it's not just the 71% of people under $30,000 of income that have a smartphone. It's the fact that almost 30% of people underneath $30,000 in income rely on that as their only way to access the internet. And so the cell only or the cell first, the mobile first kind of approach is really about making sure that if we do get somebody online, that we are not excluding them because they do not have screen width. We're not excluding them from being able to participate fully. And so we want to make sure that the platform, we talk a lot about mobile first. We want to make sure that the platform is optimized to work there and everywhere else. So that's just to put that out there. I also, there's a few comments that have been floating around about, how do we split up? How do we deal with demographic questions up front, behind? I would suggest thinking very carefully throughout the survey about what information is the most important to get from everybody, because you do have drop off naturally in any survey, and this platform will capture anything that is entered. So if you enter one question and then close your browser, it will be logged, and so that first question ought to be the most important one in a lot of ways. And I will emphasize that there are some of those demographic questions that are really important to capture. It is important to know who we are talking about in order to understand these results, not just get numbers of responses. So I do want to emphasize that doesn't necessarily give you a clear answer. And I know that everybody wants to have a clear answer. Should we be putting them up front? Should we be putting them in the back? In many cases, we will ask the most important questions up front. Sometimes that includes a demographic question or two with an ask at the end. Do you have a moment to answer a little bit more about yourself? So there is a third path that could allow for some of those details that maybe are secondary in the demographic section to come back at the end. And then the final point that I'll make just on methodology, this is kind of my role, I will leave the content to others, is I agree that in general, check all that apply questions that can be, clearly, all of these would apply to me. It can limit the usefulness of the data on the other side if we end up seeing a lot of people answering everything. I would offer as a suggestion to tweak the language slightly to talk about what are most important, what are the highest impact, those kinds of language points, and then limit the choices to 3 of 6 or 2 of 6 or 2 of 5 or however it breaks down, so that you're forcing people to make some choices in prioritization there based on their experience. And that doesn't work for all questions, but we do find a lot of people really want to ask ranking questions where people explicitly put things in order. And I will put one caveat on that, which is people, by the social science research around this, people can relatively easily rank about 3 items on a list. After that, the accuracy of item number 4 versus item number 5, much less item number 4 versus item number 7, is almost none. Like there's very little actual difference in their brain between those items, and it's very easy to overemphasize things that end up on the bottom of a list. And so I just wanted to put that out there as another piece of kind of survey design wisdom that we've picked up over the years. So I will leave it at that, and I'm happy to answer any follow-ups if there are any.
Thanks. That's really helpful, Ryan. Stephanie.
Yeah, a couple of additional things. So with regard to question 13, on what actions you'd recommend to make Burlington a healthier and safer community, I'd suggest an additional question that asks people what organizations or agencies or entities or actors could be most relied on to help promote public safety in Burlington, and then give people a list of choices and a space for other. Regarding the 911 question, which I guess is number 5, I was puzzled by this. You're asking people to talk about something they may or may not have had experience with. And so maybe that was your intent, is to find out how, sort of what they think about 911. And if so, fine. But it might be useful to ask, have you ever used 911? And then to ask how satisfied they were with that. And you may, again, as I said, test whether people have confidence in it, even if they haven't used it. But I think you should, anyhow, I've kind of said what I wanted to on that. On question, the long list of events that happen to people, I'm looking for the question, number 3. I'm not sure that people will know the difference between emergency response and crisis response. I had some concerns about the use of crime as well. And I thought maybe just a little bit more specificity. So, for example, theft and property theft is, something that gets talked about a lot in Burlington. So you might want to be more specific about that. And I suggest that you put question 9 before question 8. So asking if people have had an interaction. So what you're doing is you're first jogging their memory about their experience, and then you can ask them about their experience. And I think it's probably, Perry already said this, but going back 5 years and deleting prior to COVID would be useful there. And I want to second Zoraya's comment that it does feel a little bit leading here, and to have a question about whether people have had a negative interaction or observed negative things with regard to the Burlington Police Department seems also useful to do. And I don't know how to craft that, but I just offer that as some feedback, and that's it.
Great. Any more hands? And if not, then Karis and Karima, I invite you to, oh, sorry, I see Milo.
Thank you. In addition to what was already said, I just also want to, in a prior life, I worked in digital advertising. So the fact that this is mobile optimized is actually really important to me. And I want to assure Councilor Freeman that this is really a great opportunity. There are significant studies that have been done by all the major search engines as well, by Google. And at one point, I worked for a company where they actually came and spoke about all the stuff that they're doing. I mean, everyone's worried about NSA. People need to worry about Google. But the bottom line was that people are more likely to have internet access on a smartphone than they are to actually own a computer or laptop. So this, having it mobile optimized, I believe will increase participation, because there are a lot of people that when it comes down to making choices about do you have a computer or laptop in your home versus needing to have a phone to communicate with, that phone is going to be important. And the overwhelming number of phones these days are in fact smartphones. I would like to have a question, because I think we do want to hear, of course, primarily from people who live in Burlington, but we are going to have people who live outside of Burlington. So I do agree that that it would be worth it to have a question asking people if they are a business owner or work for a business in Burlington. I think that would be a good direct question to have some data on. And if they are a business owner or work directly for a business that is located in Burlington, what are public safety concerns that they have related to owning or working for that Burlington business? We hear a lot about quote unquote quality of life issues and interactions downtown specifically. So it would be, I think, if we have a way to kind of quantify that and see how people respond to those questions, I think that would be helpful data to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Milo. And I just want to highlight something that Nell said, which is if it's great that we've got a PDF version, and if there could be a way that we get, I think especially for houseless populations, a way to, because I think that is a good population that we want to tag, a way to do this as a paper survey by a few folks. That would be really great. And then going to go to Karen and then Perry again. And
I just have a quick comment. I think, Soraya, you were the one that had said this, and just want to reiterate that right now we've got the paper version is 26 questions. It sounds like we may possibly be adding a couple, which means we're going to have a survey of around 28 questions. And I would just encourage you to have some sort of a, maybe even, human and entertaining kind of something that says, still only 3 more questions to go, or something that would keep people engaged so that they would finish it. We do want as many people to complete the survey as possible. I think just something, either that or the bar that goes on the bottom of a lot of surveys, or something that keeps people going. So that they know that the end is in sight. A lot of times you fill out a survey, it says 5 to 10 minutes, and you're 20 minutes later, you're like, yeah, I don't think so. And it's a little frustrating. So thanks. Thank you.
Great, Perry. And then hopefully we can hand it back to Karis. Oh, Perry, do I need to allow you? Good.
I think Commissioner Harp with the P still has his hand up.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I just wanted, thank you for saying, clarifying about the mobile first. I think that makes me feel a lot better about choosing like mobile first in terms of folks who are actually accessing this via screen. I think it doesn't necessarily, like it sounds like folks who own a mobile device, if you don't own a mobile device, it's not likely, I don't know how likely it is that you use another device, but basically I just want to make sure that this is accessible to folks who are more like, who are at least, not just folks who are not likely to experience police violence was, I think, my concern around that. But I'm glad to hear the clarification around why, as far as like screen access, we're prioritizing the mobile version. That was really helpful, and I really appreciated the clarification. I think Commissioner Subino brought up some great points on question number 3 on page 4, and I think I entered this into the chat for the not for attendees, but for panelists, and that was an accident. But I just wanted to, so I'm having like sort of relatively some just sort of concerns about the broader tone of the survey. And I think to me, it just really jumped out to me that the lack of Burlington police officers or police sort of being listed as an option on number 3, which were, what are your greatest concerns in your community when it comes to public safety? We know that police are, it's a leading cause for violence. It's the 6th leading cause for Black men. I think that not having that as an option to me indicates that this survey, to me, there are parts of it that are just not well written to capture the things that are actually making folks unsafe. And one of those things, which I think can make folks uncomfortable, but is true, are the police themselves. So I will definitely give more feedback over email. That sort of suddenly like kind of clicked for me what I was feeling frustrated about overall, especially just really thinking about that's like the 6th leading cause of death for young Black men, and that's not even an option as one of the responses. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Perry. We've got Randall, and then back to Kara's question mark.
Thank you. This is quick, and I'm not making any concrete suggestions here about the survey. I'll just say that I think that it would be a good thing for the Burlington Police Department, or for the city of Burlington, to start trying to acquire longitudinal data about attitudes towards the police department. And so I don't know to what extent I think that many of the questions on this survey are not particularly well suited to being asked again next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to see whether or not various attitudes are changing about how public safety is implemented in the city. So, and so I know that this particular survey won't necessarily be repeated, but to the extent that some survey questions can be repeated in the future, I think it'd be a good idea I think it might be helpful, if it is possible, to think about whether or not there are questions that can try to track community attitudes towards public safety and policing in the community. But like I said, that's not a set of concrete suggestions right now. That's just something I think ought to happen in the future. Thank you.
Great idea. Thanks. Karis.
Yeah, I'm also going to ask my colleague Karima to unmute and stop sharing the screen. Well, Joint Committee, let me just say that I write pretty big. My handwriting's pretty big, but let me just count the pages of comment, which is so awesome. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages of comments, and then some comments in the chat box. And I am so thankful. This is it. This is what we want, right, Karima? And again, this is not be all and all. Our recommendation is that the Joint Committee will consider launching this by the week of May 10th. We are consultants with a project deadline that we have to work by, okay? So before May 10th, there's gonna be another revision of the content. We have to limit the number of revision. And so another Word document after all these 10 pages of comment and all other ideas are considered. Another Word document will be submitted to you. And then after that, Ryan will input in the platform, Naptionaire. okay? And then we will get to revision on the platform. Now, nobody asked me this question, but I want to answer it. Yes, there will be a simplified paper version, but someone mentioned about having a stack somewhere. Folks, do you remember we all started the process with stakeholder workshops and engagement? We're going to go back to them. We're going to go back to our community partners and say, will you be our collaborator, our partner in becoming survey ambassadors? And the word, I think, is we don't want to skew anybody. I think someone's trying to say the word skew. We don't want to skew any survey respondents, but we know that Talitha being located in Washington, Ryan in Oregon, we can't do this alone, right? So we're going to go back to our community partners. Prima, you've been wanting to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say exactly what you said. Thank you. And this is something that we're continuing to revise, so you'll receive another version. I think, Karis, you and I didn't talk about it. I think we need to send it as a link where everyone can provide comments, so we're not trying to scramble looking at everyone's comments. And if there are things that are not changed, we will also provide an explanation for that as well. We are aware that the survey length does need to be very concise so that we get more responses. So we'll also be working on that as well. But go ahead.
But Joint Committee members, we do not want this to be a booklet. Okay, so if we can limit it to, 28 is a lot already, but we do not want it to be a booklet. And as a consultant, I am investing in this because I am falling in love with Burlingtonians. More and more I engage in, and I have only been doing it two-dimensionally. And so I'm also investing in trusted community messengers who's going to be on the ground, people have told us, grocery stores, radio station, right? Those ideas are also welcome on how can we increase participation of survey respondents. And I also want to close by saying that we need you. Like y'all showing up to town halls, NPA meetings, it is an incredible encouragement. So can you also partner with us in becoming the survey messengers, right? Like get the word out. So with that, I will also work with Skylar on making language accessibility, handling that for not just residents, but also business owners, especially in the United States. Most of the small business owners are either refugees or with a background in immigration. So I am very keenly aware of that. And I want to make sure that we will also look into this. With that, do you have any other comments?
One more thing to add. So the survey will go for 3 weeks, and that'll give us the opportunity to track not just how many people are responding, but who's responding. So if there needs to be more outreach in different areas of the city, we can do that as well, and just continue to partner with some of the trusted community members.
Great. And then with a break, I just want to quickly, because some of the comments were in the chat, and I just want to make sure for the visual people who are watching this, not on Zoom. One person said, I called the police department directly a month ago to obtain assistance in an emergency. A dispatcher connected me with a police officer who I worked with directly on the phone and on site. I don't see a place on question 9 to relate that. Stephanie said, consultants in question 3, I think you might want to change the language on violent crime and delete enforcement. Community member said, how about, have you ever hesitated to call the police because you think it will make things worse for you personally or worse for the situation? Thanks. Any other thoughts and comment on this item?
I was just wondering, what is our goal for the final survey, and what 3 weeks do we plan on having it out there?
Are you asking what type of engagement and outreach activities are we planning on having?
No, I'm trying to get an idea of the timeline. So what date would be our goal to have the final survey format completed, and then what 3 weeks do we plan to have it out there for citizens to complete?
So we'd like to wrap up all and have a final version by the end of next week, and then we're launching the survey May 10th. That's our goal. And then The survey would close, I believe, May 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, can I just ask why it's 3 weeks and not longer? Like what the purpose or benefit of that?
Our contract ends on June 30th.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you. Okay. Thank you.
And Jane, I've done multiple surveys around different cities, and usually after that time period, you don't get as much of a response. It starts tapering off. So
Okay.
So hopefully 3 weeks should be plenty.
That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
The only other thing I would like to add, someone had mentioned earlier, one of our public commentators, about how we were asking if people were aware of MPAs and public meetings. I still want that question there, because that is something that's been discussed a lot in terms of how do people get information about what's going on in the police department, or how can they give feedback. So we definitely want to know the awareness of those things, but I would like maybe a more targeted, open-ended question of, what type of community engagement would you like to see? Thank you.
And thank you for elevating that question, Milo. So that one was put there, and that was one of the ones that I think that we were going to comment that we would like to stay, because we have heard a lot from community members about they want to feel more empowered. They want to be part of decision-making processes. So what would be helpful is also to hear from you all on your end. I think we could leave it open, but I also think there's an awareness piece. If we could have more examples of how community members can have an opportunity to be involved, I think that would also be helpful.
I would agree with that. So I would like to have that original question still be there for that awareness, because those are the main things that people should be aware of. Now, maybe they don't take advantage of them, or they can't take advantage of them depending on work schedules, education schedules, etc. But just having a dedicated open-end question just to deal specifically with community engagement, I guess that's been a pet issue for me. I think that there's a lot more community engagement that could happen. I just think the relationship between parts of the community and the department really need to be improved. And I love the fact that the survey can pick up that information geographically. I think that's really important, because we have something that Commissioner Seguino and I had talked about is the concept of neighborhoods, right? Because you can go into Ward 3, but it's made up of some very different neighborhoods. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this? Great. Closing this item, Karis and Karima and Ryan, thank you so much for joining us and for listening to our feedback.
Keep them all coming until the deadline, okay? It's a generative process. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
And then the next item on the agenda, I see we could have amended the agenda, but it may just be easier to say. I didn't prepare anything. I was meaning to go to Police Commission, but I've just been a little bit slammed over the past few weeks. So I don't have anything to present. If anybody has any particular thoughts, happy to hear them. But other than that, I would move us to item 5.
I move to adjourn.
Motion made to adjourn by Commissioner Stromberg, seconded by Commissioner Hart. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 6:49. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Chanel, and welcome again, Karen and Jane.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.